So yeah, I am NATASHA GREENHALGH. I am co-founder and creative director of the Nxt Museum. And we opened the museum last year, end of August, so right in the middle of a pandemic. Perfect timing to create a space that would love people to come and visit it. But one thing that was actually really lucky is that because, sorry, the sounds go up and down. Because we focus on new media art, we were able to still keep moving forward, to still keep building and creating, because that's the nature of digital, that we could install it locally and that the artists could still keep working. But yes, so I am NATASHA, I'm from Nxt Museum. What is Nxt Museum? We are new. I imagine not so many people have yet managed to come and see us because of travel restrictions, but we are the first museum in the Netherlands fully dedicated to new media art. And for us, that really means working at the intersection of art, science, technology, and sound, and really creating a dedicated home for these practices, a physical dedicated home. I'm sure many of you know, but what is new media art for those of you that don't know? Because it is a really, really broad term, and it has been around from, some would argue, maybe the 50s, but predominantly the 60s. We see a lot of quite famous artists coming from the 60s. So it covers a really broad range, like I said, anything from video art, 3D mapping, cyborgs, AI, artificial intelligence, worlds now being created in the metaverse, 3D printing, graphic design. So it's a really, really broad spectrum. It's a very broad term. And what's also really interesting is it's very fluid. So it's called new media because the media or the medium changes every day. Well, almost every day with the rate that technology is now evolving. So yeah, we focus on the arts of the future today. And as I said, new media art is constantly changing. And for us at Nxt Museum, our focus is really looking at what are the most modern contemporary tools that are being used today or tomorrow to create works. What are tools that are being used to focus on contemporary subjects and contemporary challenges that we face as a society? So not looking at stories, narratives, histories of the past, but what is occupying us today and what is occupying us tomorrow. What are our fears? What are we excited for? What do we want to create? What do we want to see exist? We are totally and utterly obsessed with the future. We believe the future is the most fascinating concept of the human mind. As a species, the idea of the future is what has always driven us forward. It's sent us to crazy new worlds. It's encouraged us to create technologies to, for example, send a rocket ship into space, shaped in very odd shapes and sizes. I think you all know the rocket I'm talking about that went out this year. So it's this obsession with the future that really encourages us to keep moving forward, to keep progressing in art. And this is what we really focus on at Nxt Museum, is the newest form of creative expression. And how do we do this? We seek, show, question, debate constantly. We're constantly having conversations, constantly researching, constantly questioning the world around us, inviting new conversations and new modes of connecting with one another. This is actually an installation at Nxt Museum, but you will see more in a minute. So if you want to focus on the future and you want to look at new modes of artistic expression, for us, what's really, really, really important is creating a space that doesn't just exhibit artwork, but also really invites all different types of thinkers, makers, listeners, destroyers to come together, to research, to test, to learn, and also to fail. Because if we want to innovate, we also have to have space to fail. So for us, it's really important that we have a welcoming space that invites all types of creators to think about things from a different perspective. So, as I said, we opened last year in the middle of a pandemic, a big physical space for new media art. And for us, we really went from this notion of a white box to a black cube. The image and the video you see on the right-hand side was our big giant black box when we first moved in. And we spent quite some months, years, doing a lot of research into, okay, if you're going to make a dedicated home for new media art, what exactly should that be? And the center of that was lots of research and conversations with new media artists, with technologists, with specialists in sound, and really asking them, what do you think we need to create the perfect canvas for new media art? So it really came from the creators, not us saying this is what should happen, but really asking those that are going to visit the museum and those that are creating the work what they want and what they need. Hopefully we achieve that. And this is our inaugural exhibition. There's a little video. So yeah, we went from a giant black box that was totally empty into creating a series of different rooms, all to house new media art. And for us, one of the biggest learnings was to have individual spaces for each installation. So often when you go to museums or to festivals, you have sound or light that's maybe bleeding in from other installations or other spaces. And what we learned from artists is if they can have their own dedicated space, it makes it much easier for them to tell their story. So when you come to Nxt, you only have one installation in each room. And I think that's really important also for telling a really strong narrative, a really strong story, because then you can really understand the work and also see how technically complex these works are. So we really focus on creating a space for the many, not the few. We want to create a space, like I just said, where all sorts of thinkers and makers can be exhibited. From artists that maybe before weren't considered artists. We have an artist in the exhibition called Rewire, and he is a computer programmer. He has amazing work that we saw on Instagram of him doing interactive testing on a kitchen table. And we were so impressed with the interaction design that he was doing. We invited him to the museum. We set him up in the space, and he came in with his oranges, and he was rolling his oranges on the floor. And by giving him the right connections with a sound artist and also our technical provider, he was able to develop his work into now a fully immersive installation. So for us, it's not just looking at those that are considered artists by the more traditional art world, but also making a space that can invite new sorts of artists. And as well as making a space for new sorts of artists, we really wanted to create a space where it reaches a really broad audience. So those that maybe felt alienated or that museums were not for them, they're boring, they're too intellectual. We wanted to start to make steps to break down this boundary to show that art really is for everyone. And we do this in three main ways through our programming. So as I mentioned, you see on the top left, we have an exhibition, and that has 7 large-scale installations. But we also run a whole series of public programs. And I'll show you some examples of those. And for us, public programming is really important because especially in new media arts, performance is often where you see these works take on a whole new life. and really show you a different angle or a different side of the work. And at the very center of, I suppose, the core of what we do as well is a space called Nxt Lab. And from here, this is where we focus on education and creation. So like I said, really looking at how can we support new talent or give our audience tools to understand the artworks. So I think 5 of the 7 installations are new commissions. So for us, it's, like I keep saying, really important for how can we create a platform for new talent. So a little bit about the current exhibition. It's called Shifting Proximities, and we're very much in this exhibition looking at how global events that happen and technological development impacts our proximities. And proximities is the space or the connection between us. So take, for example, COVID before opening. I mean, we can go to a rave, we can dance, and we're this close and sweating all over each other. And then suddenly COVID happens, and our proximity in the Netherlands is 1.5 meters. So we're all doing this kind of 1.5 meter dance with each other. So our proximities are constantly changing because of global events that happen and also technology. So now we're all scanning QR codes all of the time. And we also saw after 9/11, suddenly we just got used to being tracked and traced even more with CCTV and surveillance. So we're really looking at how do these developments of kind of cultural things and the development of technology, how do they impact us as a species? So we have, like I said, we have 7 works. I will just show you 3 works to show you how varied these installations are and these practices. We focus on new media art, and new media art is really broad. And for us, in our installation or in our exhibition, it's really important to show how broad these practices are, because there's also a bit of a misconception. We're noticing that digital art is big immersive projection, and that's all it is. So the work, for example, of Helene Blanken, she really was focusing on creating new types of digital habitats. And she scanned natural artifacts from a traditional museum, made an entirely new computer software, and then turned these artifacts into whole game environments. And what she's looking at is what's going to happen to the future of our natural environments if we carry on the way that we are. Are we going to end up with the only way we can interact with nature being in these gamified environments? So from the work of Helene, which as you see is a more digital kind of based work, we also have a work by Thijs Beersteker, who is an ecological artist who worked with an Italian scientist called Stefano Mancuso, and they together made this work, Ecocentrum. And this work is I think it's probably the size of this stage, and it's a 3D printed tree root structure that's hanging in the space, and it's made of recycled plastic. And it's examining and illustrating the communication that's happening between trees. And I think this is a really good example, this work, of showing how the power of art and how art can be used to illustrate and communicate topics or scientific research that otherwise is really hard to understand. And also, also shows how much conceptual rigor and how much scientific and technical research has to go into creating these works. One other work that I think is important to highlight. So hopefully what you see from these 3 pieces is they're really communicating on and exploring topics that are really prevalent in today's society, that are urgent and have a really deep meaning. And for us at Nxt Museum, it's also really important not just to show the impressive, spectacle, bombastic side of technology, but also to show the social political challenges that we face. AI, for those of you that don't know, is actually created with a very biased data set. And what I mean by that is that it can only respond based on the information that's put into the algorithm. And what the urgent work of Joy does is expose that actually that data set that all of our AI devices are based on, even the devices on your phone, from IBM, from Facebook, that data set is created predominantly by white males. So this means that a lot of AI actually struggles to identify non-white people. So all the technology that we're now using is being evolved on a data set that is actually really exclusive of a lot of people. So for us at Nxt, it's really important to not only show the benefits of technology, but also to show the harm, and so that together we can hopefully bring this message to the public and together find a way to keep evolving these technologies so that they can be beneficial for everybody and not just benefit a few people in society. Hopefully before I go to public program, hopefully what you also see from these 3 examples is not only how broad new media art is, or how broad the installations are that we show, but also when we curate our exhibition, it's really important to focus on the diversity of those that we include. So, like I said, creators from different backgrounds, like for example, Roloff, wasn't what he would call an artist. He was a computer programmer. So opening up kind of that bandwidth of who is considered an artist, but also making space for those that are misrepresented from a sexuality point of view, from a gender, from a cultural point of view, and really look at creating opportunity for everybody, regardless of gender, regardless of sexuality, and regardless of culture. So, like I said, as well as the exhibition, we also have public programming. So we have a large space called the Next Stage, and here we have a whole range of public programming which will happen in the evenings or on the weekends, and it happens in all sorts of different forms. So, for example, this is Amsterdam Dance Event. I don't know if anyone has heard of Amsterdam Dance Event before. Yeah, one person. Basically, the whole city turns into a rave, an incredible rave, a huge party for a whole week, or maybe Wednesday to Sunday. And a lot of the electronic music pros from all around the world go to Amsterdam for conferences and really good parties. So we have paired up with them in 2020 in the pandemic, and also again this year to create, maybe you can see more on here, to create a series of installations and a series of dance performances. You want to go? You want to go party? Now you're awake. See, this is what we need on a Friday. You just want to see some dancing, and then everyone is happy. So the one we did in 2021, to us, was just absolutely incredible because we did it as an artist residency. So we started this in December 2020. I don't know about you, but I can't remember years anymore. When you're in COVID, you're kind of, what year are we in? So we started this in 2020. Obviously, we've been a year in a pandemic. The music industry, the event industry was totally destroyed. So for us, it was really important to look at how can we try and help facilitate creatives, artists, and musicians. So we set up an artist residency, and we had 2 sound artists and 2 visual artists. And together online, they created new audio-visual performances, which we then luckily, just like really luckily, managed to do in the space as 4 nights of party. So as you can see, maybe we can turn the light off for one moment so they can, yeah, perfect, thank you. So maybe you can see here we have this giant limbo space in the museum. It's 9 meters high, And we had these projected digital worlds in the space. The DJ was in the middle, and then everybody was just kind of raving around the DJ, which for us was incredibly powerful to see after everyone being locked away for, at that point, over 8 months, I think, in Amsterdam. Something quite different. We've also just done a series of events by Michela Peluso, who is an Italian artist. And as you can see here, this is a very different direction from having these large-scale projected works. And she has actually been developing her space-time helix for 10 years. And she also is a teacher, a music teacher, and she was very much looking at the relationship between the body and a sound wave. And from that, she created this audiovisual experience. Really, really incredible work. When you're sitting in front of it, you almost don't know if it's a hologram or if it's digital or if it's something physical. So it's a beautiful example of how actually you can use more physical, traditional materials, because this is string attached from floor to ceiling with a kinetic disc that's spinning around, but it really takes on this digital life and whole different digital form. So from that all the way then also, again, in times of COVID, everyone was stuck in the house. At this point in Amsterdam, you weren't even allowed out. We had a curfew in the evening, and you could be in a maximum of 50 people in one giant room, and you all had to be 50 meters apart. So we created this series called the Rewire Sessions with an artist called Albert van Arp to try and find new ways to listen to and experience music, and new ways to activate the body and be together at a time when actually we kind of became imprisoned in our own bodies. We couldn't move, we couldn't dance, we couldn't connect. So Albert created a whole sound score that was to kind of take you to a whole new dimension, because there was no escape of what was happening around us. And in line with that, he also created these self-generative visuals. So when you were in the space, everyone was socially distanced on their mat, and it was an active meditation where you were guided by the sound and by the generative visuals. So I think that gives you a kind of an overview of how varied our public programming is. And like I said before, third, but one of the most important things for us is the Nxt Lab. So yes, we have the exhibition, yes, we have the public programming, but for us it's really, really important to look at how can we create a platform for new talent, how can we create access to technology, because as I'm sure many of you know, these technologies are so expensive. So through Nxt Lab, we can give people the opportunity to use our space, to use our technologies, run residencies, and also look at how can we educate the wider public and wider society. How can we try to make people more tech literate, so we don't have some people in the world that understand technology and those that are left behind knowing nothing. So for example, this summer, we did Studio 404, which was run by AVELINE, who is here, her really incredible program. And it was 16 to 24-year-olds, and we had 2 courses in creative coding and filter creation. So it's not just about supporting creatives, it's also about supporting audience to be able to understand technology, understand these artworks, and give them the tools to also feel welcome in cultural spaces, in museum spaces. And then finally, we also had online programming as well, which went anything from education programs for addressing ethics. This is something we also did for Ars Electronica. We had an Ars Electronica garden last year, to workshops. So for example, with Jeremy Bailey, people created their own filters. And also on the bottom right-hand side, we also had an online game with incredible collective called Kaiken. So that kind of gives you an overview of who we are, what we've been doing for the last year. And I was also asked to kind of speak a little bit to what is next, or what do I see as the future for immersive experiences, and also for this whole field. I think for me, a really, really important one that I don't think is something of the future, but I think it's actually now, is Web 3.0 and the metaverse. Every single one of these slides coming up, I could speak for a week about, and I don't want to stop you getting to the club, so I will kind of click through. But the metaverse is huge, and it's here, it's now, and there's so much incredible artistic development that's happening on in the metaverse. There's also a lot of dangers that we also need to be aware of, but this is definitely something that I think will have a huge impact on our practices at Nxt Museum, and I also think the way that all of us operate. And I think it's like when the internet first came out, and many people kind of really pushed back against the internet. I think that it's exactly the same. It's here, it's happening, and it's just for us, I think, to try and push it in the right direction so it can be something positive. Another big thing that I think is important for us all to be aware of, educate ourselves on, and I think will have more and more of an impact on our practice, is blockchain technology and NFTs. Huge topic. Again, I won't go into it in detail, but it's a good one for you to maybe research into if you don't know much about it. But very simply, blockchain technology is now being used to create contracts for digital art. And this, for digital artists or new media artists, has some really good benefits, because for the first time, digital art, which is an unstable medium that can be copied time and time again, now has a way of being made unique. So that means it's much easier for digital art and new media art to have a financial value placed on it. So it's really beneficial and has a lot of potential. But there's also a lot of critical conversations about the access around this and inclusivity. Finally, two more things of what is next and where do I see the future going for new media art and new technologies. One big area is integrated technologies. I think that we're going to see more and more of how technology is integrated into ourselves physically and into our environment. I'm hoping, actually, with time, we even move away from having screens. Anybody who spends much time with me will know a screen is one of my biggest enemies, because I feel like it's a prison around all this incredible three-dimensional content. But I think we're going to move further and further away. I think we're getting to a point now where devices can be really small. And I think a good example that many people don't often think of is the Apple EarPod, and that now, especially in COVID and having a lot of conference calls, we've kind of got used to just wearing it permanently in our ears. And I think there'll be many technologies like this that start to become just part of our bodies, until maybe we end up living like they do on the right-hand side. And finally, immersive spaces. What do I think is the future for immersive spaces and immersive digital art? Well, we are seeing a lot of immersive spaces. There is a huge trend for immersive experiences. And I think this means that more than ever, we need to be really critical and think about why, and also what does it mean to be immersive. We need to kind of think beyond just giant projections, really think about our different senses, and also realize that being immersive doesn't have to be something super huge and spectacle. Being immersive is, in its very essence, being mentally totally absorbed by something. So I think it's pushing beyond the current trend of immersive being something that surrounds us entirely, and think about what are the small intricacies that kind of take us into a new space. And as part of that, I think it's important to, as we design, as we create new artworks, new spaces, it's really important to think about and understand what it means to be human. Because we're living in a world that is increasingly governed by technology. We're using technology in every single part of our life. And I think it's really important that we don't just use technology for the sake of technology, but that we use technology to empower us and to connect us and to enhance our human attributes. So basically, if it doesn't enhance who you are as a kind of tactile species, I think we should question why we're using it. And finally, we just have to keep researching. It's so, so, so important that we keep increasing access to technology, that we give artists and creatives the opportunity to explore. Because if we don't create education and research opportunities, then we're never going to keep innovating, and we're never going to keep progressing. And that's why we also have to be super critical with our practices. We need to be super critical of the technologies we use, why we use them, what's the impact, what's the greater impact that's happening in society, what happens if Mark Zuckerberg really does develop the metaverse. And I think that it's everybody's role in society to question what is happening with how our art and technology is evolving, because artists, it's often artists that can bring to life these really challenging subjects. It's often artists that make us aware of problems that are happening in society, and that's the power of art. It can help us to understand really difficult subjects on many different levels. So, my final slide, new media art for the future. As creators, as artists, I think also just as citizens, I think it's really important that we keep creating new media art. As I said at the beginning, is by nature unstable. So the tools that we use today to create are not going to be the tools that we use probably next year. So it's really important to kind of update the tools that we use, be flexible, and keep looking to new forms of innovation. And I would also advise to really think about the practices that we pursue and ensure that we're designing, creating, exploring from a place of intention and passion. Understand what your position is, why you're creating the artworks that you want to create, what's the impact this has on society, and don't be afraid to think outside the box and break the rules if you see something different, because that's the power of art, to challenge and to move us forward in society. And as I said before, to not just be seduced by technology for the sake of technology. This is what art can do. It can bring to light the problems. And finally, it's really important that we all together create what we want to see exist in the world. And hopefully this is also what we're doing with Nxt Museum. It's an entirely new type of space, and through this space, we want to create a platform for others to bring their vision to create their future. Thank you.